evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the February 9th edition of Beyond the Headlines. My name is Colin Dowe, and I will serve as your host this evening. Of course, I'll begin this evening, as I do every Monday evening, by saying thank you. Thank you for making us a part of your Monday evening. Thank you for joining us. It is with you and for you we do this. So we are certainly appreciative of your joining us this evening. With me this evening, I have two special guests as we take on independence, sovereignty, and reparations. All big topics that we can handle individually, but we're going to pool them together. And with us in studio is Mr. Arley Gill, international attorney. Welcome, Arley.
Thank you so much for having me once again. I'm coming quite often.
You are.
Happy New Year, happy independence.
To have you coming and to share.
Thank you.
And likewise, alongside him is Dr. Wendy Grenada, political scientist. Wendy, welcome.
Good evening, Colin, and to your viewers and listeners. It's nice to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure, to have you and for us to take on this topic of independence, wrestle with what sovereignty means, and of course our struggle for reparations or repair. But before we begin, I certainly would want, on my own behalf and on behalf of the GBN family, to extend the deepest condolences to the family, the friends, the classmates of Alejandra Let Hippolyte. While we were on the verge of celebrating our 52nd anniversary of independence, we got the news of her violent death. There are no words that can explain occurrences of this nature. There are no words that can bring comfort to those impacted, the family members, the friends, the loved ones, the classmates. There are no words that can bring comfort to those who may have been impacted similarly, though they survived, because it comes to life all over again. On my own behalf, and on behalf of the GBN family, we sympathize. We hope and pray that time will bring some measure of healing, which is all that we can hope for. And while the topic is independence, is sovereignty, is reparations, I want us to start here because this is an important aspect of the society in which we live. Ali, you are an attorney, and we heard an old cry that something must be wrong with the legal system in order for a serial offender to be back on the streets and commit what is an escalation of the crimes that he was already charged for, convicted of, and served time. How did we get here?
Thank you. And I believe that's a fitting way to start tonight's discussion. But allow me to join with you and to join with GBN and the national community, I believe, because the outcry has been far and wide from Grenadians at home and abroad with regards to the violent death of this beautiful, brilliant, and promising young lady, and to extend condolences to her family, her friends, and to the national community of Grenada. I have seen and heard, quite a bit of the outpouring of emotions after this news shook, adversely so, our national celebrations on the 52nd anniversary of our independence. And it is with great sadness that we had to bear that over the weekend and to deal with it. First of all, crime of this nature is arguably the singular most dangerous threat to our national economy. A couple weeks ago, we all were up in arms when the United States upgraded our security alerts, and we know how that affects our tourism product. So that crime, in my respectful view, and if I were to echo the Needham Point Declaration, is a serious public health emergency, that we put it on the same level as an epidemic. What that means is that there needs to be a holistic criminal justice reform in the state of Grenada. I've seen persons speaking with regards to harsher penalties, that the judiciary is not doing enough. But if I may just put that in perspective, when persons say that there is a need for harsher penalties, you ask them what sort of penalties are they asking for? And I can say to you that the maximum term of imprisonment for rape is 30 years, which is significant. And that amendment to the law was made in 2014. Before that, the maximum for rape was 15 years, so it has been doubled. And 30 years, basically, there or thereabouts, is a lifetime in imprisonment. But beyond that, there are more fundamental issues with the justice system. So it's not the issue with the judges, and I see persons saying the magistrates. All rape matters is indictable offenses that go before a high court judge, so not the magistrates. So please, let us be clear on that. Don't blame the magistrates for what they know nothing about. Secondly, the judges of the high court are guided by universal sentencing principles. So that in this particular case, as I understand it, the gentleman pleaded guilty to the offense of rape around 2016 or thereabouts. And the guilty plea attracts naturally a third from the maximum. You're right. And then the judge would look at mitigating and aggravating factors, look at the menu of that, what attending the particular circumstance of that individual and the offense, and then make a determination. And I believe he was sentenced to 13, 12 years or thereabouts. Now, the issue is what happens from the time the judge sentenced that person to the time he releases the prison. He's released from prison. And there, I believe, is a fundamental breakdown, because we're talking about programs of rehabilitation. We're talking about programs of pre-release. What do we do when persons go to prison for 5 years, for long-term, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years? Even if you were to sentence that gentleman to 20 or 25 years, we can say that one day he will be back out. What do we do? So that there's a serious need for us to look at prison reform and make sure that prisoners access psychiatric treatment, psychological treatment. In case of sex offenders, there must be sex offenders treatment as well, which is a specialized area of study. We have spoken a lot about the sex offenders registry, right, which needs to be implemented, so that when sex offenders are released from prison, we monitor them by way of GPS and so on, by way of a serious probation program for 5 to 10 years to monitor them, and so on and so forth. Then we talk about we have no halfway house, so that persons come, are released when the prison doors are open and they finish their sentence, and they open the door and say, go. You don't know which community they are going. You don't know which homes they are going. There is no supervisory mechanism in place that ensures that they do not go into homes and communities with vulnerable persons and so on and so forth. There is no monitoring by the promotion unit, so they're back into society. And in many of these cases, when you have such violent recidivists, you are speaking about another issue, mental health issues. There are a lot of mental health persons suffering with depression and so on, walking up and down the streets every day. We come into contact. What are we doing with those persons, you know, so that you have homeless persons on the streets of St. George's? They bring them to the magistrate court all the time for pilfering small items on supermarket shelves and so on and so forth. You take them and you send them to Richmond Hill prisons. Right? They frustrate the prison officers, who obviously are not trained to deal with these persons. They frustrate the inmates there as well. And then they go back into society 2-3 months after to repeat the same offense. So that, you know, that's why we need a complete overhaul of the criminal justice system. And that, to my mind, is seriously urgent. I believe that that area of national development has been ignored for far too long. And now we are seeing that, when these incidents occur, we have a public outcry. 2-3 months later, when there's a cooling off period and we've gone back without no reforms, without no program or policy to put in place to prevent these things from happening. So that, Colin, there's a lot that can be said about these incidences, but I urge fellow nationals to first of all get the facts straight, right? Because I believe that the sensationalism and so on and the misinformation that we spread that goes to the international media platforms does Grenada no good. And secondly, I would like to use this opportunity to call on the government to embark upon a holistic criminal justice reform that looks not just at the rehabilitation and reforming of persons who are convicted of offenses, but also to the victims of the offenses. Because so too, just as when the case is finished, the victims go back to their community and so on, and the convicted person go to the prison, just so we leave the victims. So that in some societies, and what we advocate for, is that we continue counseling for the victims. There are, in some cases where the victims have suffered tremendous loss, that there is a victim fund by the state that compensates them and so on. Because oftentimes the persons who commit these offenses really cannot compensate these persons for their losses and so on. So that a comprehensive criminal justice reform program will not only look at the offenders, but also look at the victims. And also the community. We have to play a role. We have to play a part. So that when persons come from prison and so on, how do we treat them? How do we marginalize them? Do we ostracize them? Do we provide them with no employment and so on? In other words, they come out of being punished for the crime that they have committed, and they put them on the edge of society, not embracing them and so on and so forth. So that even the community needs to be prepared. And that is why when we speak of a holistic criminal justice reform, it is not a matter of the police investigating. The matter has been brought to court. The court deals with the matter and send it to the prisons. It must be, first of all, prevention of offenses. So that is why you need psychological examinations for persons who are delinquent in the schools and so on to begin with. So that you try it as early and as best as possible to identify persons with deviant behavior. So you deal with that from the schools. That's that. Now, for juvenile offenders and so on, the last resort for on all juvenile justice programs, they say the last resort is to charge young persons for criminal offenses. You try different interventions on at different levels and so on, so counseling and so on. And we need to invest in those sort of technical skills. Persons think that, we need more police officers on the street, but we need police officers that are trained in psychology, that are trained in handling juveniles and so on and so forth. So that, for instance, we have a special victims unit of the criminal investigation department. Brilliant initiative. So too, you need in every police station, in my respectful view, persons who are trained to deal with young offenders in Guave, in St. Mark, and so on and so forth, to treat and to intervene, so that we do not, as much as is possible, we do not easily upgrade young offenders, put them into a system where they sort of hone their skills.
Okay. Wendy, your perspectives. Woman, social scientist, citizen of Grenada. What was your take when you got the news? What was your response? And how do you feel we ought to be going about dealing with this situation?
Thanks, Colin, and I too want to join both of you to extend my deepest condolences to the family, the friends, the classmates. It is not easy for a society to have to grapple with an offense like this. There is nothing that could bring back human life. And as a woman in this society, it really always pains me when I see we have to endure this over and over again. And that does not mean that gender-based violence is only against women. but predominantly so. So I really want to extend my condolences. But how did I feel? This was on the verge of our 52nd anniversary of independence. And if independence is about freedom, that young woman was unfree in that she could not walk in her community and not have to endure that kind of violence. But we want to look historically. Gender-based violence has been part of our reality in terms of the sexual plunder of women historically. And the question becomes, from a sociological perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a historical perspective, what are the sources of the gender-based violence? Some people say, okay, you know, there's mental health cases, and of course, but what causes a human being? What accounts for this? And I think we have to get to the point where we are outraged enough that we can find solutions in terms of, and I heard Arley, and I agree with all of that, in terms of criminal justice reform. That is a very important legal perspective. We have to think about, what does masculinity mean? How do we mentor young men in our communities? What becomes the responsibility of the homes, of the school system, of the churches and other community groups? What allows our young men in particular to fall through the cracks? What allows them to be adrift? And what in a human being could allow them to get to this point? So how do we find solutions? The solutions must be holistic, multifaceted, and we have to find ways to ensure that through legislation, through policy, through the education system, a whole of society approach. This cannot be acceptable behavior. This cannot be acceptable behavior. It is too painful and it is too frequent. And if we are independent, and if independence means freedom, this is some unfinished business that we have to fix.
And you know, what I'm also hearing in terms of the holistic approach, it's one of culture. We hear the number of sexual offenses when the annual assizes are being called. Some are of the view, and I lean towards that I'm happy when I hear the number of offenses because people are reporting. Yeah. It means that we are standing up in our society and say this is not acceptable. We need more of that. Yeah. And how do we break this cycle of gender-based violence, of believing and making light of sexual abuse? And you know, you have terms like broth and not use the term rape. And culturally, it seems to have been acceptable. And in 2026, we need to have a society that say, no, it's not acceptable. And we all are whistleblowers and ensure that the perpetrators are punished. And that cultural shift is important. Arley?
And it begins with the socializing of young men, young boys in their homes, so that the disrespect to young ladies is not welcome and is denounced in the homes. So socialization in the home and in the community begins there. Education in the schools, formal education. I lived in Malta for a year, and culturally I've never seen a male say psst at a young lady. That was a culture shock, right? And so that is something that can be done in terms of respecting young ladies and so on. And so that we speak of socializing in the communities, we speak about education, formal and so on, and it also have to be reflected in our popular culture, or music and so on and so forth, right? You know, what we play on the radio, what we see in the movies and in the different social media platforms, all those things have a way of influencing
and normalizing
certain behavior and certain conduct, so that you know, it's a challenge. Let's not sit here and pretend that, listen, by the wave of a magic wand, we can resolve these issues. But we have to start somewhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I believe we have to start in the schools and in the homes.
And what I'm also hearing is that we probably need to take a look at ourselves and recognize how we are either approaching or placing others on that slippery slope. Because I'm certain, for example, the artist who sings songs that incites would be outraged as we are, not recognizing they may very well be contributing to the problem. Yeah, Wendy?
Yes. So we have, I agree, we have to ensure that in our consciousness at every level and in our socialization, we have to ensure that we instill values that cannot help to perpetuate this kind of behavior.
Okay.
And let's not forget the role of the church. You know, I believe the church have a critical role to play in moral building, you know, building morals and values in society and so on. Let's not forget they continue to play a very important role.
And, you know, I hear the church, but I don't know that they're bursting of the seams with congregations. And therefore, we have to do other things in order to reach the people who are impacted, whether it is perpetuator or otherwise.
The point I'm making is that every sector, every stakeholder in society needs to play a role. And I can say to you that Independence Day I was up and about, and in my community of Marigot, and the members of the Adventist congregation came and prayed for us on the block where we cooking oil down. And I was touched. So that, you know, we need to call upon the church and let's say to them, you know, the outreach programs, the prayer meetings and so on they used to have long time. They need to, all these elements of society are critical. You know, I mean, what helps to build character in young persons and so forth. So, you know, I would say maybe the family can't do it alone with all of the influences on social media and so on. Maybe the school can't do it all alone. All of us, all hands on deck, you know, to really see how much we can reverse some of these negative trends in society.
And if I may say too, to support that, the church is supposed to go out and build the nation. But you hear people saying, oh, they're not coming to church. But you're not going out. I remember when I was growing up, they had something called open air. You know, in a crossroad, they would be there, you know, trying to win souls. But now people saying they're not coming. But the command was to go and find them where they are. You know, and I think the church has a very, very serious responsibility to help heal the society.
I'm happy that they were out and praying on last Saturday for everyone. You happen to be blessed because you are the block at the time. But let's reflect on independence. If we were to transition, we celebrated 52nd anniversary of our independence. Wendy, what does that mean?
What does that mean? You know, when we think about independence in very narrow political terms, we think about a sovereign state. But I was quite happy to hear our Prime Minister, in his independence address, provide a more nuanced understanding, a kind of socio-cultural reading of independence. And I remember he said it's not only independence from colonial rule and so, but this is independence for. And we have to ask ourselves, independence for what? Independence for what? How do we become free or freer? What does it mean to be human? How do we live with one another? What are our aspirations? And I think when you ask me what independence means, I think about independence not in terms of a date. Dates are particular markers. But I see independence as a long march for freedom, to break the unfreedoms that have shackled us, unfreedoms like poverty, illiteracy, ill health. And if we are marching through time, we have to ask ourselves, at this juncture, how free are we? And we have accomplished quite a lot. I always say materially, many of us have advanced materially. But are we living better in terms of our quality of life, in terms of how we treat each other? The days when a village used to raise a child, we did not all have cars. but there was something in the quality of life in the community that kept us together. And I think independence must be a high form of freedom, collectively and individually. It must be what is happening to our economy, what is happening to our society, what is happening to our polity. Now, when we look in very narrow terms, we say, yes, we are sovereign in that we could vote in the United Nations. Grenada has a legal personality in terms of international law, and we are independent. But if we are to link independence to sovereignty, there's no country in the world that has absolute total sovereignty. Sovereignty is always negotiated, and we can speak about that later. But I think we are an independent nation, but we have to think about independence differently. It's not just about the flag, and I would encourage every Grenadian to read the speech that the Prime Minister gave on Independence Day to help us to understand that it is more than shining a trophy and celebrating a particular date, but it is independence from and for, and we must know what that for is.
Right. The process of independence, Arley, your take.
I begin by always grounding the independence, and I begin with the fact that before the sightings of Christopher Columbus of Conception Island or Camahorn, Grenada was independent. So we were independent with our first inhabitants, the Kalinago people. I like to begin there because the history of Grenada does not begin with us as a colony. Does not begin with us as an enslaved people. Or does not begin with us with having massa. We began as a free people. So I believe in grounding that, then we then appreciate and pay homage to the first inhabitants on the island. 52 years on, and the fact that we had independence in 1974 is an acknowledgement that we were once governed by external powers. Now, having said that, independence is a process. And as Wendy pointed out, you know, it's not, let us make an analogy with rights. You have the right to speak, you have the right to assemble, and so on. But you don't have the right to disturb people in their home, making noise all over in the night. You know what I mean? Similarly, with independence and so, you know, there is interdependence in terms of trade, in terms of doing business with other states, and so on and so forth. The fact of the matter is that we have political and civil rights that we ourselves, in large measure, make decisions that will affect our economy, affect our international relations with other states, and so on and so forth. But of course, it is not gay abandon, it's not just independence. And for years we have been grappling with that issue. I remember Calypsonian Bubbler singing that song, What Independence Mean to We? Blessed Bubbler of blessed memory. Thought-provoking calypso. And we're still at the stage where we are, and I believe that the Prime Minister's offering on Independence Day may be his most consequential speech to date, frankly. I thought it had substance. I read it because I thought that he provoked a thought, you know, about independence and freedoms and so on and so forth. And that is why it is important that when we discuss the issue of independence and when we start going into the issue of reparations, because we have to appreciate that as much as we bad talk Uncle Gary, the father of independence, he tried well, you know. Because in 1974, just like other Caribbean states, on obtaining independence, the British government did not give us a bounty. They did not give us resources to say, look, here is the money to pay 3 months for public servant wages, or to build roads, or to fix the hospitals or the medical stations. When we were given independence, we basically had a constitution and a document and say, go try all your best. So that, and that is, you know, in a real sense, after years of colonial domination and so on, we were left to fend for ourselves. And that is why we believe that it is fundamentally wrong. Similarly, when emancipation came in 1838. Well, 1834, apprenticeship 1838. The former slaves were left to fend for themselves, right, with no regard to the fact that they were forced to work on a plantation system and so on with absolutely no compensation. So that the linking of independence and emancipation and the discussion that we are having tonight, one can see the thread. Because I always make the argument that the emancipation is arguably, without emancipation we couldn't be having an independence conversation. You know what I mean? Emancipation is the precursor for independence. It's another stage, it's another phase of our liberation of our people and development of our civilization. So that we need now to harness the qualities of our people, strengths of our people, develop on our weaknesses and so on, and to build a civilization that 20, 30, 100 years from now, that future generations will say that those of us who have went before, indeed, they are proud of us. And I believe that's a challenge.
It took 140 years, almost, from the end of the amelioration period to independence, as we defined it. From what I just heard from Arley, we went through 2 sets of abandonment. Because at the end of the slavery, we were abandoned. And then we will continue to be colonized. And on the 7th of February, 1974, we were abandoned again. How do we pick ourselves up? Where do we focus? Independence for what? Our march and this process ought to be towards what?
Okay, right. I want to speak about another time we were abandoned after 83, when we were invaded. I don't know that we benefited as we could have after invasion. But independence for what? We have to ask ourselves, how do we want to live? The children who were born on the 7th of February this year, 40 years from now, what Grenada must they be living in? That little boy or girl. We have to think about what kind of economy we want. When we look at what is happening in the world now, we have to ask ourselves, how do we take control in as far as we can over our economy? And the lessons that we can learn. For example, during the period of the PRG, we were doing things. We're talking about food security today. They didn't use those terms back then, but it was eat what you grow and grow what you eat. Idle hands for idle lands. This is a new time, but we can take the principle from back then. A people who can feed themselves, I think the highest form of your independence is your ability to feed yourself. So we have to be rethinking agriculture. In the school system, in our communities, we have to be thinking about that. We have to be thinking about new partnerships for trade, alternative partners for trade. We cannot continue in the same old dependent relationship with the West. We have to continue with our traditional partners in as far as we can, but we have to look for new markets, new partners. But it has to start with the mind. You know, the Barbadian philosopher, Dr. George Lamin, he spoke a lot about the sovereignty of the imagination. He took sovereignty out of this realm and demystified it and said, how do we think? Do we have the power to control our condition? And how do we imagine how we must live? So our economic decisions have to be such, and that's why I believe in regionalism, because I think the Grenadian market is small. If we had to have a single market and economy with the rest of the Caribbean community, there's still a possibility that we could gain some kind of competitive advantage. We have to think about diversifying the cultural, what we call the orange economy, or artists, or cultural energy. You know, when we were producing cocoa and nutmegs and bananas, we could have been constrained by size. And we could say, you know, well, the economies, diseconomies of scale, we cannot produce X amount because this is our land space. When we get into the creative economies, there are no boundaries around our imagination and our creativity. So that is an opportunity in this 21st century for us to diversify intentionally and look for ways that we could find niches. So a new kind of compact with Grenada, as I like to call it, a new way of being, must mean that we have to do our political economy differently. We have to look for ways to diversify, and we have to start in the education system. We have to find ways to get young people interested. You know, technology, the cultural industries, we have to be able to do that. Politically, we have to look at our political system and ask, is our politics working for us? And if we're honest, we know that our politics could work a lot better for us in terms of being more inclusive, not marginalizing. How do we deal with dissent? There's a lot that we can do differently in terms of how we govern ourselves. And then our society, things like crime. We can't speak about being independent and free where we have criminality. Because, you know, when I speak about sovereignty, it's like your house, and your sovereignty is like the lock on your door. And you don't want intruders, whether it's viruses, whether it's a foreign power, or whether it's a criminal. So in totality, is the society, is the economy, is the polity, how do we find a new path to be better?
All right, and I like where you're going, because I'm hearing one of mindset, not size, but mindset.
Yes, yes.
And the one of the key pillars coming from the School of Psychology, if we're looking at the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or basic needs, or safety, security concerns, or food concerns, we need to secure that before we can think otherwise. But viewers and listeners, it's time for us to take our first break, so we'll take a break and we'll be right back.
Welcome to Cafe Lola, located at True Blue in St. George. The perfect place to study, celebrate, or simply unwind, where coffee meets elegance and every detail is made to delight. From fresh bakes to custom-made orders, cakes, waffles, pancakes, donuts, and many delicious, irresistible treats. They are your neighborhood cafe and bakery. Make Cafe Lola your go-to spot for fun, flavor, and to put a little sparkle into your life. Good Vibes Only opens Monday to Sunday from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays 7 a.m. to 12 midnight. Cafe Lola, your #1 spot. Visit today. For more information, call 404-4446.
Kids Planet, located at number 3 NIS Complex, specializes in everything for your children from newly born and upward. At Kids Planet, you will find clothing, school bags, hair accessories, sandals, shoes, strollers, car seats, bathtubs, baby bags, swings, walkers, playpens, and many more. So what are you waiting for? Hurry on down to Kids Planet and find what you have been looking for. Or call them on 444-3996 or 533-3996.
Follow Short Pre for your car stereos and music. Looking to upgrade your ride or replace that Japanese car radio? Prestige Audio is having a big car stereo sale for all vehicles. Toyota, Suzuki, Honda, Nissan, Jeep, and more. We've got you covered. Enjoy free installation at our Lucas Street branch with clean, professional, plug-and-play installs you can trust. Need powerful sound for your church, home, party, or DJ setup? Visit our XL Plaza, Grand Anse location for PA systems, speakers, mixers, microphones, and car audio built to perform. 2 locations, 1 name you can trust. Visit Prestige Audio today, where sound meets excellence.
This Monday on Beyond the Headlines, free but owed, the real reparations question. Join host Colin Dowe as we tackle independence, sovereignty, and the realistic probability of reparations with an expert panel which will include Arley Gill, chairman of the Grenada Reparations Commission, Dr. Wendy, political scientist, Eric Williams, chairman of the Guyana Reparations Commission and deputy chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, Professor C. Justin Robinson, Principal and Pro-Vice Chancellor of the UE5 Island Campus. Don't miss this lively and insightful conversation. Tune in Monday at 8:30 p.m. Get the facts, hear the perspectives. Go beyond the headlines only on GBN.
Got something to share?
Call us at 440-1252.
WhatsApp 405-3052 or 407-8458.
Or email gbnnews@gbn.gd.
GBN News, first, accurate, voted #1.
Viewers and listeners, we're discussing independence, sovereignty, and reparations. In studio, Mr. Arley Gill and Dr. Wendy Grenada. Ali, we're talking independence, but you used the term interdependent earlier on because no man is an island, although Grenada would happen to be a tri-island state. Reflect a little bit on the current geopolitical tensions in our region, and what does that mean for this independent state?
The recent geopolitical tensions in the Caribbean Basin and Latin America, and indeed globally, has now put a small island states like Grenada in sharp global focus, I would say. Here it is that what we are, the foreign policy and indeed the domestic policy of the United States of America, which is the most powerful country in our hemisphere, if not the world, has really and truly, how does it now affect the issues of sovereignty? How now does it affect our decision making on major national and international issues? Grenada in recent times, we have been asked to put a radar, military grade radar, on our international airport, and as convener of the Grenada Coalition for the Zone of Peace, we were against it, and I believe 90% or more of Grenadians were against that. We prefer to remain neutral, friends of all, satellites of none. And secondly, now we understand that we have been asked again, and I'm saying ask because I'm not sure if the demand was made or what language was used, to accept persons who the United States is desirous of deporting from their shores. If the United States, with all its resources, cannot deal or cope with those persons, how can a small island state like ours? What is the consequence of we saying no? And this presents us with tremendous challenges. Now, frankly, I would prefer to see a regional approach. I was on a program before with Dr. Grenade, and I heard her talking and advocating for a foreign affairs think tank in Grenada and so on. And I believe that's the way to go. I believe that the government must reach out for human resource outside of its cabinet walls and put it in a sort of formal setting that can feed into, provide it with alternative suggestions of how you deal with it. But most importantly, it is for the strengthening of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States as well as CARICOM with regards to international relations. Grenada, the size of us and so on, it makes it difficult for us to withstand the constant pressure. I mean, person says the manifest destiny, the Monroe Doctrine, I say the big stick policy. Is either that, and then when you look at the change in global perspectives, and I believe that the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney's address at Davos was very instructive, and he referred to Canada as a middle power. If Canada is a middle power, then what does that make us? You see? So that in a real sense, it is reinforcing the characterization of Grenada and so on as a third world country. And David Rudder sang a song once, where he said, in a world that needs islands no more. Okay. And David would have sung that more than 20, 25 years. It's only that now they need us, well, it's getting worse. You see, so that when we spoke earlier with regards to this issue of the mind, I say we use different language. I say independence for liberation. Because what then will drive our people to eat what we grow and grow what we eat? It then evolves around a preference of eating ground provisions and what we provide. You see, so it's not just the farmers alone doing farming. It reflects on our consumption patterns. You see, so that it's very challenging times, and I believe that the current geopolitical construct is reducing or eroding our sovereignty in a real sense. But we need leadership of substance at the same time. Because, Colin, when the ball started to roll, who knows where it will stop? So for one, they ask us about radar. Two, they ask us about refugees. What next would they ask us for? When will we say enough is enough? When will we stand up? You see, so that it cannot be that we know we do not have nuclear weapons. And President Lula of Brazil, he made a very strong comment a couple of days ago when he says that, to remove a sitting, you can only remove a sitting president or prime minister in countries that do not have a nuclear power, unless you have this ultimate deterrence. So we know that where we stand in the grand scheme of things. We know that we do not have any political or military might to speak of. But what are the avenues we can use? What are the strategies we can employ to ensure that we can preserve this space, the Grenada space, the Caribbean space, in as much as is possible, to preserve our basic tenets of independence and sovereignty, and to ensure that our region remain a zone of peace as much as is possible.
When the Munich report talk about the wrecking ball politics that has been adopted by the U.S., Arley spoke to a number of the requests, asks, demands coming to us within the region, and there seemed to have been an OECS approach, certainly to the third country nationals. What are your thoughts on this, and is that the way to go, given our shortage on human resources to negotiate in terms of that level of capacity, and our basically ignoring of training in the diplomatic corps? Because I don't know that we have a cadre of individuals who are trained in international relations. Party hacks get appointed as ambassadors, etc. Not necessarily a trained diplomatic corps being sourced and continuing. So just share in terms of the approach, and what does that mean for our sovereignty and our interdependence as OECS states to begin with.
Well, for the last 20 years, I've taught international relations. And I remember being at a university, and the professor is explaining a concept called complex interdependence. He was speaking about China and the United States. I said, they'll never go to war because they have complex interdependence. He said, take a country like Grenada. There's no complex interdependence with the United States. All you have on that country are nutmegs and rocks. So it was easy to bomb them away. He actually said that. After class, I went up to him. Everyone had gone out of the class, and I said, nutmegs or rocks. He didn't know I was Grenadian, right? I'm saying that to say, when we look at the world and where we're at now, it makes the Cold War look like a piece of cake. Because in the Cold War, there was something called mutually assured destruction, MAD. We talked about deterrence. And because of this MAD, mutually assured destruction, in a bipolar world where you had the USSR and the United States, it meant they did not go to war directly. Their proxies were involved. What we have in now is the unprecedented is becoming the norm. The rules-based system that was set up is being dismantled. And the question becomes, for us in the Caribbean, in Africa, in Latin America, in the global south, what become our options? If we are navigating rough waves and the waves are becoming rougher, how do you sail through? And I believe that while regionalism is not perfect, your foreign policy harmonization and coordination, this becomes very important. We cannot individually as Grenada take on the might of the United States alone. We have to have good negotiating skills, know how to bargain and trade off, how to bargain and trade off with your sovereignty, how to bargain and trade off in terms of what would you give up to gain something else, and the larger platform on which you could stand to fight. Because what are the weapons of the weak? Because the strong will continue to do what the strong can do. But the weak must not have to accept what they must. How then do you break that mantra? The collective resilience, building a real community of Caribbean and Latin American states where we harness our energies, our intellectual capital, and we negotiate collectively. We build human capacity within our foreign ministries. And yes, I did say that I think if we have a foreign policy think tank with state and non-state actors, just dissecting the world, trying to understand, trying to look for solutions. It cannot be about just trying to survive. It has to be, how can we become strategic?
Are you saying that we're living in a society of reactionaries?
Yes, yes. You know, we can't just be going by and, you know, from one accident to the next in terms of foreign policy. We have to understand how principle, pragmatism, neutrality, alliance formation, how all of these things must come together to have what I like to call strategic diplomacy. You cannot just be engaging with the world and expecting that you're not intentional and that things would fall into place.
But have we evolved beyond a beggy society, expecting almost manna to fall from heaven, whether it was massa giving, whether it was the colonial powers returning some crumbs after they have had at the table? How do we change the paradigm and get more strategic and deliberate? How do we embrace a philosophy where we study what is happening, where are the power bases, what are the interests of the power bases, what are our own interests, in order for us to begin negotiations and have that conversation? How do we turn the corner on this?
We have to turn it by changing our minds, by trying to define ourselves differently and to present ourselves differently to the world. We cannot go to the world with a mindset that says we are subordinate. We have to stand tall in our smallness and now define ourselves differently. So diplomacy, traditionally you had people studying diplomacy. Now your missions, your embassies should be staffed with people who understand international law, who understand treaty law, who understand intellectual property, who understand health diplomacy. The old-time traditional diplomat is ill-suited for the 21st century. We need to shift how we think about the world and how we prepare. So at the end of the day, collective diplomacy. In Grenada, we may not have everything in one person. We may have someone skilled in intellectual property law. Somebody in Suriname may be skilled in something else. So we have to find ways, whether we're in the UN or the OAS or the Commonwealth or wherever we are in the multilateral arena, we have to find ways to draw on the best minds. When we come domestically, I think we need to be able to fortify ourselves. And despite how people may vote, we have to say, let's find the best among us who could think this thing through and come up with strategies that can help us fight better. Yeah.
I think we
need a national reset. Beyond education for liberation, that would address the issue of the minds that we speak of, and address the issue of Grenadianism, which we ought to sort of seriously adopt and so on. We have done it before, you know. Let us not for 1 second believe that we lack the capacity to do the things that Dr. Greenhill is speaking about. I remember a period of time when we were in nobody's backyard. I remember a period of time when, you know, we had a leadership that would study and think and debate and so on and so forth.
Let me ask you this. There was a time when we were in nobody's backyard, or we chose whose backyard to be in. Because as Wendy alluded to, there was a bipolar world, with two powers, and we had the man. So that at this particular stage, that is no longer the scenario. So who do we run to for protection? Because we had before, when we stood up, because we knew they were backing.
And that takes us to, I'm sorry that we couldn't have Professor Robinson on tonight, and to our listeners and viewers, is because of the internet. And he wrote a brilliant article. Nobody will save us. So that in this particular period of time, that's what Wendy is saying, is that we need the strategies that will define us in this period. We need to position ourselves in this period of time. And as much as we can see and we can think, the issue of regionalism looms large. And if it is that we do not find sufficient shelter within CARICOM because Trinidad and Tobago do not wish to join us, then we always have Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, which in many respects have remained steady through all of this. But we need decisive leadership at that level as well, that would come up with the policies and the positions with regards to how the people in this region can face these new challenges. But we have to find, there's no way to run to. And that is why I made a statement that we can think that Donald John Trump, he has 3 more years, roughly, as president. All right? And for what all that he may do or not do for the remainder of his time in office, I do not simply believe that at the end of his term, the world will revert to the same thing as before he started serving this term as president. In other words, the global landscape will change.
Has changed.
And will remain so. Because when you look at how Canada, for once, the new trade region, they have made it clear. McCartney has made it new trading partners and so on. Europe is doing likewise. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has been the first Prime Minister of Britain to visit China in a long time. He went to Beijing, you see, because they have Europe, for instance, they remain mute after President Maduro was kidnapped. They said nothing. In fact, Keir Starmer said he would not share a tear for Maduro. But he was not sharing a tear for Maduro. What you have is a ripping up of the rule-based order. What you have was a clear violation of Article 2, subsection 4 of the United Nations Charter. Right? The United Nations, in its preamble, what it spoke about is that for future generations to ensure, after 2 world wars has ripped us apart, to ensure peace. And call upon all nations that have disputes among themselves to find peaceful resolutions. Right? And the countries that now form the Security Council and so on, the bigger, more powerful nations in 1941. So that the United Nations Charter, not for the first time, but maybe this time most significantly. Of course, we know of the Panama and so on and so forth, and the United States, how they have been through, invaded Grenada too. The invasion of Grenada was a violation of the UN Charter, a breach of international law. But maybe this one is far more significant in the sense that it is sending shimmers down the spine of the United States allies. And the threat and continuous threat with regards to Greenland, right, has shown the Europeans that, listen, hey, this fella in the White House doesn't seem as though he has any friends. You know, so that the world global order is forever changed, basically. And that you see the Europeans are juggling and taking different positions and so on that not necessarily may align itself with the US, so too is Canada and so on. So that in this global space, everybody is trying to find its own home, sort of, or shelter, or whatever it is.
Or what the new normal may be.
Or what the new norm may be. What say us in the region? What say us in Grenada? And I cannot see us going. I think our first step is Caribbean integration, strengthening Caribbean integration in a real sense, so that the free movement of people and so on, that the 5 CARICOM, Barbados, Dominican, Belize, and so on adopted recently, I would like to see Grenada go in that route. Yeah. And when we speak about accepting deportees from the United States, then how then do we question the issue of our immigration policy with regards to our Haitian brothers and sisters, who were the first people in this part of the world to claim independence, you see, and we speak of independence. But, you know, these are the difficult questions we need to speak to, because the Haitians, by all means, we are not and cannot treat them as second-class citizens, our own people, and say that we would accept persons from, we don't know from whence they came, what language they speak, what food they eat, right, and say that we are accepting those, and then, no. So that, you know, these are the sort of positions that we need clarity from our leaders in the region. Not just our Prime Minister in Grenada, but the leaders in the region. We need clarity. Yes, they need to speak with one voice, but we need to know what are their position on this issue, and so on and so forth, and the rationale for so doing. We expect our leaders to make decisions. Not every decision our leaders make we may agree with, but we want to know why you did this or not, which is, I think, is a fair responsibility for our democracy.
Okay. All right, it's time for us to take our second break. When we come in, we'll have to harness the geopolitical situation with the continuous call for reparations for our independent states. So we'll be right back.
Are you looking for a reliable, affordable, and customer-friendly pharmacy? Look no further than Hills and Valley Pharmacy, the nation's leading healthcare products and services provider. We are committed to serving you at convenient locations. Find an extensive and affordable selection of prescription and over-the-counter drugs and medical supplies at Church Street, Hillsborough, Carriacou, Jubilee Street, Grenville, St. Andrew, near the bus terminal, and Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George. Our committed team is always available to offer valuable assistance for managing your health and wellness. Discover the additional benefits of our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street and our Medcare Center on Grenville Street, where we provide in-house physiotherapy, massage therapy, doctor consultations, and eye care services. Our commitment is to satisfy all your healthcare needs, including competitive prices, loyalty rewards, and special discounts for seniors. Contact us at 435-6904 and WhatsApp 535-4734. Choose Hills and Valley Pharmacy. Remember, your health is our business.
The Grenville Cooperative Credit Union introduces its new digital platform, managing your finances at any time from anywhere.
As a part-time student, balancing work and studies can be a real challenge. But with GCCU's digital app, these worries are no more. My parents can now remotely transfer funds to my account, and I can check my balance at any time, giving me the freedom to achieve my goals.
My days can be long and tedious. With this app, I can ensure my loan is paid on time, transfer funds to someone else's account, and check my balances. I don't have to rush to do business during my lunch hour or after work anymore.
With this app, I can request checks to pay my suppliers, letters for my business transactions. I don't have to leave my farm to go stand in line.
The Grenville Credit Union digital platform. It's convenient and secure banking right at your fingertips. Download the app today from the Play Store or App Store, or call 442-8602, 459-4325, or 416-8467 for further information.
You can now make a payment directly to Grenlec, anytime, anywhere. Just visit myaccount.grenlec.com and sign in. From the menu, select Financials, then Billing to view your account balance and billing history. Ready to pay? Tap Make a Payment. Choose the account or accounts you'd like to pay and hit Next. Select Debit or Credit Card. Enter your amount, fill your payment details, and tap Confirm and Pay. That's it. Your payment goes through instantly and your account updates right away. Sign up today and put the power in your hands.
Grenada, the countdown is on for the most exciting relay showdown in the nation. The IMA National Relay Meet, carded for Saturday, February 21st, 2026, 3 p.m. at the Kirani James Athletic Stadium. Come witness speed, relentless competition, and heart-pounding relays that will keep you at the edge of your seats from start to finish. The island's fastest teams will battle for glory, but who will rise to the top and claim the prizes? You have to be there to see live. Admission finish line $50, main stand $30, secondary stand $20, and bleachers $15. Children 12 and under pay $15 for main and secondary stands and bleachers. Get your tickets. Feel the speed. The IMA National Relay Meet 2026, the ultimate relay experience.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. Independence, sovereignty, and reparations. That's the theme for this evening, and we've been talking lots of things, certainly within these circumstances that we find ourselves in, geopolitical situation. Ali, you head the Reparations Committee in Grenada, and we've been doing lots of work. But share with us, within this context, where are we? We have our colonizers, or former colonizers, on the back foot, as it were, based on the nationalistic outlook of the U.S. What type of leverage, what type of strategy can we adopt to keep the momentum for an appeal for reparations alive from the very same ones who seem to be running and hiding? We're talking UK, we're talking the Europe, seem to be on the back foot. How can we embrace them and have a conversation about reparations within this environment?
I think we're getting there. I will say to you that, and I'll answer this way, Britain has been the highest block or wall against reparative justice. We have seen in 2019 and 2021 the King and then the Prime Minister, who is now NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, apologizing for slavery and slave trade and so on. We have seen in recent times the Church of England. They would have apologized. They have made some monies available in quote-unquote reparative justice. But we say to them that they cannot decide on how much money they should give or how the money is spent. In other words, we have spoken about crime in this program. A criminal cannot decide his own sentence, right? So that we have issues how it is done, but we believe that the Church of England, they come in foot. And hopefully we can get the Catholic Church to go that way as well. The Catholic Church is extremely important, and the papal bulls of 1493 and the principle of discovery is what really rationalized and gave legal legitimization to colonies and slavery and slave trade and so on. And so we have seen in families, we have seen institutions come forward and make apologies and try to make amends and so on. But we are at a critical juncture in the reparative justice struggle. Last November, October, a few of us, leaders in the region and advocates for reparative justice, we went to the UK for the very first time. Met at universities, we met with all of our diplomats from the CARICOM region. We met with them and gave them a briefing and so on, because this year, SHOGM, the Commonwealth Heads meeting, is going to be meeting in Antigua. And that is a very important one for us. We are pushing for the subject of reparations to be on the agenda. It is in our backyard now. And then the king have to come visit, who is the head of Commonwealth. So we see this year and that Commonwealth meeting as a very important one for us in this phase of struggle.
We talk Commonwealth. What is the value of the Commonwealth to us today, one? But we're also talking about becoming a republic. So what it would be the incentive for the UK to have any conversation with people who wants to reduce the realm by coming out of the Commonwealth through becoming a republic, etc. I mean, how do we continue that engagement?
The UK, the motivation for them is to correct the wrongs that they have done, is to pay the debt that they have owed us. That in itself is what we're about. We are interested in republicanism. We do not see the king as our head of state. But even then, you will find that republics continue to remain as part of the Commonwealth, as Barbados and Dominica and Trinidad and Tobago and so on. Because now it has become like an economic bloc, so to speak. Right? It's another bloc where countries like ourselves, we build partnerships for trading purposes and so on and so forth. So now it is losing its historical significance, where the British, and rightfully so, where the British sought to keep for about colonies in a sort of relationship. But as I said, that it is time for the British to pay their debt. But we're seeing, for instance, on March 25th, Ghana will be filing a resolution in the United Nations, and I hope that other CARICOM countries will be co-sponsors, or they will join. And that resolution is for the declaration of the slave trade to be one of the crimes against humanity. And that resolution in the United Nations is for the very first time. Ghana is lead country in Africa for reparative justice. So that you will see now that the African Union is on board with regards to the reparative justice. The Caribbean, through the CRC, continues to push it. And so that the Europeans have been closed in all over the world with regards to the subject of reparative justice. It is in the United Nations. It is going to be, for the very first time, in the last Commonwealth Heads, we were able to get reparations in a paragraph in the communique at the end of the Heads meeting. This year, we're advocating that it becomes a subject on the agenda. Just today, interestingly, the heads of government meetings will be from the 27th to the 29th in St. Kitts, and the subject of reparations will be discussed at the heads. So that all of what we have spoken about with regards to independence and sovereignty, we believe that it's extremely important that reparation is paid. And we have been on this program before, and I want to believe that our listeners, our viewers appreciate that when we speak of reparative justice, we're speaking, one, about apology. We're speaking, two, about debt forgiveness or debt cancellation. We're speaking about technology transfer. We're speaking about investment in education and health. We're speaking about repatriation for the Rastafarians and other persons who want to seek to repatriate to Africa. And there are countries like Ghana and Senegal and so on and so forth are implementing policies where we can apply for Africans in the diaspora, can apply for citizenship and so on and so forth. So that is ongoing.
There were some adjustments, I believe, recently from Ghana, and that I find interesting, because as we take care of our own, I'm talking about the local politics now, you know, it seems as though Ghana dialed back a little bit on the embrace of the people from the diaspora coming in, even though they're willing to be sponsors of the reparations.
Because we have to know, for the countries on the continent, the cost of relocation, housing, education, health, and so on and so forth. And that is why in our reparation plans, we're saying that the former colonizers must underwrite those costs. Because you forcibly remove us in the first place. You see? So that, but I make that point to say that I always like to dissuade persons from thinking that anytime they hear about reparations, they think it's a blank check we are looking at. And if you follow the debate, the discussion on the British press, on the newspapers and television and so on, I believe one of the pushbacks in the UK is because of fear. They're fearful that this reparative justice thing will bankrupt the economy. So when I go to the UK and speak and so on, one of the running joke I have is, listen, we did not come with any container ships to load up your money from your treasury and sail back to the Caribbean. That's not why we are here, right? We speak of reparative justice as a developmental plan for the region. So the money that we speak about that we did not get in 74, when they said they give us independence, after centuries of exploitation, they must need to start compensate. If you look at it, and I challenge persons locally and so on, from 79 to 83, the revolution invested more in education and schools, up Bonnet Bailey Secondary School, St. Max, and so on. The British never did in 74. We had to invest in our educational plans on our own, basically, right, to provide primary school education and secondary school education and build our own college, basically, from ground up. You know, and we are saying that you know, after centuries of exploitation and wealth extraction from our societies, and we were responsible for the Industrial Revolution. And that's the other link now, because we start talking climate justice. It is impossible to speak about reparative justice and do not speak about climate justice, because the slavery and the slave trade was the genesis, was the fuel for the Industrial Revolution that started the wanton pollution and destruction of the environment. So full circle, right? And we now become the most vulnerable societies that are affected by the climate change, even though we are not the one to build the big factories and so on and so forth. So that we believe that we are making massive strides. I believe, and I fervently hope that reparative justice will happen in our lifetime. If you asked me that 5 years ago, I would say, boy, you ain't looking as if I go see it. But I say from where I sit, I believe that in some shape, in some form, that we would be able, and this subject of reparative justice, I say to persons simply, do the research. The Germans gave the Israelis, the Jews, paid the reparations and continue to do so. The Americans, for the Japanese war, they paid the Japanese the reparations. What it is then about black people, that we seem to be the only race on the face of the earth that cannot receive our reparations payment. But so I say that because it's not a vacuum. It's not, you know, it's not a far-fetched idea. It's something that has happened in the past. And I can say to you that right now, Namibia and Germany is locked in discussions. I met my Namibian counterpart a couple months ago, and they're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's for the atrocities that Germany did in Namibia. They are soon time, I believe in this year, they will then reach an agreement with regards to the reparative justice package between us. So it's happening all around us. It's just that now the big one is us here in the Caribbean, the survivors of the Atlantic slave trade and slavery. And the UK in the first instance. Then we have to address the issue of the Catholic Church, the French. I see that Martinique have just signed an associated relationship with CARICOM and so on, which is excellent. And at the top of all of what we're speaking about, you know that in the Caribbean we still have colonies.
Are you as optimistic, Wendy?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am, because I've seen the movement over time. And, you know, if we think about native genocide, if we think about enslavement, if we think about colonization, and if there's one word that would bring it all together, brokenness. So if we've had brokenness, what we need now is repair. If we're talking about independence, we have to see reparations as part of that repair. Now, Professor Hilary Beckles, I remember in 2013 he was here for the Caribbean Studies Association conference, and he was speaking about the health challenges, the non-communicable diseases. And we're speaking about that today, Colin, because the sugar, the salt, the oil.
Don't talk about oil after we had all that.
I know. Our very palates were wetted. And repair is necessary, because when we look at the non-communicable diseases that really threaten our lives and our livelihoods, that's one reason. The CARICOM 10-point agenda, and Ali spoke to most of it, becomes very important for repair. Because if colonization, if enslavement, if native genocide was about brokenness and really disarranging our societies, we need repair. So I am optimistic that in my lifetime I would see repair in different forms.
In different forms. Ali, we must have help. And it can be argued that when the slave trade ended, there were people in England lobbying, right? The slaves benefited from that lobby. May have been an economic decision eventually, largely, but they benefited. We saw Laura Trevelyan and Trevelyan family stepping up, in recent years, both in terms of a lobby and shoving their hands in their pockets. Where are we in terms of, let's say, the use of the funds, and have any other pledges come in since then?
And that's a very important question, because one of the issues is that when we studied history, the abolitionists was a big thing for us, William Wilberforce and so. And we continue to engage. There are good persons who continue to lobby for reparative justice, and the Trevelyan family is one such family. The funds that they give us is all of it, what they promised, that they delivered on that. And we have started a scholarship program through the University of the West Indies, Grenada branch, open campus, I believe it is called now. Global campus. Yeah. So there are Grenadian students who are now benefiting from that fund at the global campus, University of the West Indies, here in Grenada. And that again fits into the 10-point plan. Because when we speak of reparative justice, one of the issues we want to address is education. And of course, tertiary education is extremely important if we have to build capacity to further our independence and our sovereignty. So that is done. And they have now gone ahead and in the process of setting up a trust that other members of the family can put into and so on for other purposes of education. So that is ongoing. They have inspired or led what they call heirs of enslavers, like similar families that have benefited directly from slavery and slave trade. So that you would have had families that did that in Jamaica and Guyana sometime last year. So that is ongoing. There's also a move in France, in a city in Nantes, where a family there is about to do on April 21st a similar apology and so on. So this initiative that was started here in Grenada, it is spreading throughout not just the UK but other European families coming forward. And persons may say, well, what they give is peanuts, right? Of course, we do not expect the individual families to pay for the sins of the British Empire. And yes, what they give us is small compared to what we are looking for, compared to what they themselves would have benefited from. But what that has done, though, is has opened up doors for us. The families come and institutions, they are influencing institutions in the UK and Europe. And just last year, we had solid evidence that the British family, the royal family, benefited directly from plantations and slavery here in Grenada. So that's another issue. And then on top of that, we know that the Bank of England benefited directly again. So that part of the process is the accumulation of all the hard evidence and the facts. right? We know that the king had opened up the royal archives for further research, so that more and more we are gathering the information and the evidence is being laid out. You know, so that we know they had facts, we have lived through the reality, but more and more evidence is coming forward with regards to families and institutions and so on that has benefited. And I dare say that the Laura Trevelyan apology and so on that he had in Grenada has really and truly ignited, in many respects, the reparative movement, because it has made, you know, global news and so on and so forth, and pushed and keep the discussion alive.
We have a 10-point plan, CARICOM 10-point plan, and the 5 points upon which reparations are viewed. Do we have confidence that when we get to the day, and you both express the optimism, that we have governments that will appropriately spend the money in order for us to benefit from said monies? Because we saw the Trevelyan family giving it to an institution, University of the West Indies, to then use to the education of Grenadians. I'm assuming, though, that a lot of this, especially if we're talking the UK government, that will come to governments. Do we have politicians and a political system that we can trust that we will benefit from those reparative justice monies?
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm happy that we have a collective CARICOM approach to this. And I'm hoping, Arley, as chair of the Grenada Reparations Committee, I don't know what is in place, but I'm hoping that there are accountability mechanisms in place. And you know, I like to speak about the community of Caribbean states, but there's also the community of Caribbean people. And the community of Caribbean people must keep the community of Caribbean states in check at the regional level and more so domestically. So I think something like this, we should be able to have accountability mechanisms, and I hope that that is built in, so that we have you know, strategies for how we can maximize any kind of reparative justice that we receive.
Okay. There is a model which is used by the Jews that we believe is an excellent model. We have a CARICOM reparations fund that all of the resources goes there, and that CARICOM reparations fund is managed by no politicians or prime ministers and so on. It is managed by experts in financial management, accountants and economists and so on and so forth. And then we in Grenada and St. Lucia and Dominica, we make an application to draw down on the funds based on projects. That way, we believe the accountability which we speak of can be realized. The last thing we need to do is to say we have reparations money, and we go down and cock every hole we see in Grenada's main road. You know what I mean? Just leave it. We would like the reparations money to address or to repair some of the ills in society. Education and health and so on and so forth. And long term, yes, because you know, we are saying to the British and so on, if you have that discussion with us, we're looking for monies over. After all, you colonize us for centuries, you know. You could keep paying us for centuries, right? So you pay them like tranche of every annually and so on and so forth. So we're not looking for resources that will, boom, we spend all of it one time, no, over a period of time. And the countries, based on their projects, can draw down on these funds over a period of time. It's a gradual process, basically. But the idea is that we must have a Caribbean Regional Reparations Fund manned by persons who understand investments, because we can invest the money to grow too, you know. You know, economists and accountants and so on, and we manage the resources, and that, you know, the monies do not go into the consolidated fund of any individual territory to pay salaries.
Okay. All right, and that certainly is a good idea. We're quickly out of time, so we need to have some parting comments from each of you. The lady will have the last word, but your message and appeal to Grenadians, as we are within our 53rd year now, approaching that 53rd year, and something Wendy said, maybe as you speak to the Grenadians, think of the child that was born on February 7th, 2026, and what message you will give to us in order to ensure that that child has a better life.
I would say that love for country does not end and begin with waving a national flag, or to quarrel when we see a Trinidadian do a music video and our national flag does not appear. It means that we as Grenadians take it on ourselves not to litter with Kentucky bucks, dirty our streets. It means that we as Grenadians, we take pride in the public investments made by our government so that we don't destroy the mirrors to aid traffic. It means that we look out for one another. We help the less fortunate. We look at our neighbors we used to do long time to ensure that the child have breakfast and lunch to go to school, and we help each other and so on. Colin, I believe that as we speak of liberation of the minds, we always speak about big things when we think about independence. Stadium, Project Polaris, big projects. But I believe the essence of the society is really and truly about getting the basics right. So that on the note in which we started, right, the issues of mental health, we see somebody, a troubled persons in the community, and so on. We don't wait for the police to intervene, but we do what we need to do to protect each other in the community and so on. And be mindful that what we see, that what we post, that when we go live, that the audience which we speak to is not just confined to Grenada and Grenadians. So that we must be very mindful of our words and our actions and how we can impact our country.
Okay.
Right. I agree with everything Ali said. And I like to speak about a great Grenadian reset. And what must that great Grenadian reset represent? How do we live with each other? I'm going right back to what Ali said. Community, the role of the church, the role of mentorship, the village raising the child, how we look out for each other, neighborliness, love and peace. We can speak about being independent, but when we ask ourselves, what is the soul, the Grenadian soul? What does it represent? Who are we? What does it mean to be human? And when we think about those little things, that can help build a society and take us from one plane to another. So we could speak about, yes, all the big projects and everything else, but how do we live? And I would want to see us, for that little child that was born on the 7th of February, 2026, that child must have hope. That child must be living in a society that is free, that he or she could walk the road and not end up where we started this program. Safety, security, others-centeredness, living where we value people more than things, because it's very easy to value things and not value people. But part of being human is understanding the essence of valuing people more than things. And I would want to see our society get back to a place where our very collective soul is spiritually grounded, because we are losing our spiritual anchor. I was happy to hear the Adventists give you a lot to listen. We need to be doing more of that, because at the end of the day, that is what matters. That is what will sustain us. Something beyond all the material trappings that we may have. So I would want us, in going forward, to think about life and what life really means, and how do we value people more than things.
Dr. Wendy Grenade, Arley Gill, thank you so very much for being a part of the Beyond the Headlines program this evening. And to you, ladies and gentlemen, we truly appreciate your sharing the last 90 minutes with us. I think the message of independence is recognizing our interdependence. And in recognizing our interdependence, we'll be kind to each other. We'll be faithful to each other. We'll uplift each other so that together we can aspire, build, and advance as one people. Thank you very much, and I look forward to being with you again in the next 6 days, 22.5 hours. Take good care. Godspeed.